Now we've got one of our bigger topics and also one of our probably more interesting topics that I'm sure lots of you are very keen to hear about. We've got source management. Before I get started on this, I do want to mention that we are going to be having a source management workshop. What I'm going to be covering here in this TOI is essentially what we delivered in Jade 2018. If you want to, go into a little bit more about what source management is going to look like in Jade going into the future, and also have your say, of course, very much encourage everyone to turn up to the source management workshop. And if you've got any really cool, and it looks like we're back on. Oh yeah, just
on that. How do we reskin the Jade skin? BJ?
Oh, how do we reskin the Jade skin? That's another one where we might say watch the space. We're looking at stuff to do with that. I can't commit to anything, of course, but we're looking at that. And I'll also say with the use of color on icons. I don't know if I'm allowed to weigh in my opinion, but boss isn't looking, so I'm completely on your side with that one. I think it looked much nicer when it was a little bit more bright and also more visually distinctive. So yeah. I'll vote for that, Jedi. Cool. Right, so it looks like we're good to continue on. We're talking about source management. So what do we deliver in 2018? First of all, we have a Jade Git Client. And we also have a new format, the DDX format, that you can use in replacement for DDB, that basically it's just better. It's related to that, and I'll get into exactly how that helps. So, first of all, Jade Git Client. I want to start by talking a little bit about Git in general. Now, I appreciate that probably quite a few in the audience are probably have used Git extensively, and this is going to be not exactly new information for you. But maybe some of you are using other source management strategies and are not on the Git bandwagon, as it were. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about what Git is in general, and then also a little bit about why we chose Git. There's many options we could have gone with. Why is it specifically a Git client? Now we're going to talk a little. Then we're going to talk about how Git clients work in general, and then how specifically our Git client works, and then just a little bit of a brief kind of picture of what's next. Although, of course, that's really what we're talking about in the workshop. So, first thing to say about Git is I've got the definition from Wikipedia, because it's always a great start to just start with Wikipedia. I love it. So it's a distributed version control system. So the idea being that you've got your remote repository, and then you've got many local copies, so that all of the repository is distributed amongst many developers, many repositories. It does a few things. It tracks changes in source code during software development. It's designed to help coordinate teams of programmers, and it tracks changes in source files. Now, you might notice at this point, one of the things Git does is it tracks changes in source files, and Jade isn't actually built from source files. So we've got the schemas and DDBs, or now DDX files, but you don't start with them and then build them into a Jade database. It happens the other way around. And so one of the things we're going to be kind of looking at is how does that paradigm look? And that's going to be something, again, pitch for the workshop, something we're going to be talking about during the workshop. So, why did we choose Git? First of all, Git is really quite rapidly becoming a de facto standard. I believe it's about 50% of the market share now. A lot of usage. Next thing is, it was by far the most requested. So of course we look at the Jedis, and pretty much all of the Jedis that were talking about source management, specifically the thing that kept coming up time and time again, was wanted specifically Git integration. So we did look at other alternatives, such as Apache Subversion, also known as SVN, but you know, get one out. So with that, I'll talk just a little bit about how Git works. Briefly covered it. I've just got basically a little bit of a picture I want to show you. The kind of idea is that you have a working directory, and that's going to have some source files in it. You can add those to a staging area, and then you commit it to the repository. So you start with your source files, you stage them, and then you commit them to a repository. That can be a local repository, and then, of course, once you've got it in your local repository, you can push it to a remote repository. So as you're kind of seeing here, there's quite a few things that we have to do, quite a few commands. You're going to need to be able to go from the remote repository back to your local. So you can do pull to grab any changes from the remote. You need to have a local repository in the first place. So you're going to need to be able to do what we call cloning. That's making your initial copy. One important part of Git is branching. The idea being that if you're going to make some changes, you don't want to break anything, so you do it in a separate branch, and you can go back to your original branch if you need to. You're going to need to be able to do this process, the add. You need to be able to do this process, the commit. Lots of commands with Git that we need to be able to do. The idea of a Git client is it's just a tool for doing those commands for you. So a Git client, what it does is it performs the operations required in order to effectively use a local repository. So it's dealing with local repository, and it's doing those commands for you. Now, there are many kinds of Git clients. There's already a huge number of Git clients in the market. For instance, there's Git Bash, which is a command line interface. You type in the command you want to do. There's many GUI tools. One example is Git Kraken. There's also Tortoise Git. There's a whole lot of them where you may get clicking on buttons to do your commits and your pushes and your pulls and all of those good things. There's also a third kind of Git client, which is ones integrated into other technologies. So generally you're looking at in a development environment. One example would be Visual Studio has a Git client built into Visual Studio, so you don't have to leave your development environment to do your Gitting. What we've done is we've done one of these integrated Git clients into the Jade development environment. The idea being that you can do all of your Git commands without ever actually needing to leave your Jade develop environment. You don't need to have Git Bash open on one window and Jade on the other. You can just do it all from your environment. Now, so that brings up, well, what can we do with our Git client? So, as it's a Git client, you can do Git client things. So we can clone remote repositories, we can check out to different local branches, we can commit them, we can push, we can pull. Looks good. And at this point, just to be a little bit more visual, I'm going to do a little bit of a live demo of our Git client, which hopefully all works. Hopefully my internet doesn't die. Right, so bring this up here. Just Oops. Just make sure I've got this sorted out. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to first be using this Git client to get some files from the Jade Software NZ GitHub over to this folder here. So hopefully I can fit everything on my screen. We don't want that, go away. So, first thing to note is if I go browse, down here we've got Git Source Control Client. So this is our client here. Oops. If I go, actually I'll just make sure that, first of all, we've got a couple of options to set up. I'm pretty sure I've set them up right, but we'll just look at the Source Management tab. So what you're going to do is you have a name and email there, not too important there, but you need to make sure you've got a working directory, and that's where it's going to put your changes. So yep, we've got that set to L1, that's good. So this is going to be my working directory. I can go browse, Git Source Control Client, clone. You see, I've got a local path, that's going to be my local. And then for remote repository URL, I'm going to be using the Jade GitHub. So I'll just copy this from my text document over to my clipboard. So I hate typing. Right, so this is the URL of our public GitHub. we're going to go clone. And dum-da-dum-da-dum, you'll see things start popping up. Got a little bit of a progress, it's doing the clone. Cool. I now have error 1 on my disk. So that was a clone command. Now you'll note one thing now, that it hasn't made any change to my, my Jade database. As I mentioned before, because we're not building from source files, we've got a Jade system, and then we've got things like, if you look in here, we've got some schemas and DDXs here. We don't start with those and then build and get your Jade system. You start with the Jade system and then you do the extract, which means that when you're using the Git tool or any Git tool with Jade, you will need to do the import and export process. We're looking at ways to try and bridge that gap a little bit. Certainly work going on with that, but that's again something we're going to be covering over in the workshop. So we've got this error 1 system. I just want to show you some of the other things we can do with the Git client. So if I go back to my client, next thing you want to do, of course, is branching. So we do checkout to go to a new branch. I'll call my new branch hello. That's a good name for a branch, I think. Cool. Now I've gone to the hello branch. I can just make it a bit visual. I'll just make a random text document, just so I've made some arbitrary change to my repository. In reality, this would be more likely a code change where you've done some extracting off some schemas or the like. Now, I can, so far this is in my local copy, but it's not in my repository. It's not in my local repository. If I go back to my client, I can then go commit. Now what you'll see is you'll see all of the changes that I've made to my local that haven't been put into my repository yet. First thing, as we mentioned, you're going to stage it first. So we stage the changes. Now I can't commit yet, because of course I need to put in a commit message. I made a change. If I can type. I can't type. It's really good. Please accept. Thanks. Cool. I hope all of your commit messages are just as good as this. And now I can go commit. Right, now my changes are committed, and it's locked into this branch. But what I can do now is let's go, oh, I didn't really want to make that, that text document. I might actually just hop back to my original branch. So I'll go checkout, and I'll go back to my master. Checkout. You'll notice it's disappeared, because now I'm looking back at my master branch, and that text document was only in my hello branch. I can then, of course, go browse, client, checkout. I can go back to hello, checkout, and it's reappeared again. Nice. The next thing I can do, of course, is, so this has all happened on my local. I might want to actually push to the remote repository. So that I'd go push, and you'll see I've got my commit here. Now, if I go push, then what it's going to do is it's going to actually get me to authenticate. So it's actually gone on my laptop screen. If I go over here, at this point it's going to pop up a message so that you can log on, and it will do the authentication for you. Once you've authenticated, then it's going to save that on that computer. So you're not going to have to do this every time you push. Just the first time you need to do your logon. If you don't authenticate, if I just close this, then you'll see that it's not going to do the push. So we do have authentication in place as well. Cool. Just get rid of that and get rid of that. So, as you saw, we did quite a few of the commands that you might expect from a Git client. There are a couple of things I do want to touch on that you can't actually do with the Jade Git client. So first of all, as I mentioned, you can't directly commit or push or pull the Jade source. You have to have that separate step of extracting and loading schemas. Basically, that's because Jade isn't actually built from source. You don't just have source files. You've got the Jade system, the Jade schemas and the like. You still need to hop across, do the extract, do the and do the loads to go back and forth with that. And again, we are looking at ways of hopefully making that process as nice as possible in the future. Very keen to hear your thoughts and suggestions about that, and we'll talk about that during the workshop. Next, there's a couple of things which we don't currently do. One of them is merging. So when it starts getting a bit complex, you're going to have all of these merge conflicts, and you start bringing up diff tools to figure out exactly what the differences are between, sorry, pardon me, between two commits. Don't have that quite yet. So you can do the basic kind of everyday easy tasks. There are a couple of things that are kind of, not quite in the Git client yet. So that, of course, brings up the question, well, given that there's all sorts of nice Git clients already, why is it that we chose Git client as the first thing to do? Why did we make the Git client? Basically 4 reasons. There's actually really 3 reasons, but I wanted it to have 4 because I think it looks better. So one of them is just kind of an extra. So first of all, connectivity. In order for us to really produce any sort of Git-based source management solution, the first thing we needed to do is make sure that we can actually connect from Jade to Git repositories. So that's something that's kind of like an invisible thing. We need to have all of our Jade libraries set up that do all of that, connecting to Git repositories. What we did, well, we made that Jade library. We can now do all of the things that you need to do to connect to Git. And while we've got that, we may as well give that in a way that you can actually see and put your hands on. So we might as well make a Git client. Most of the work is actually in that, getting that connectivity that you can then build on. So this is really about a building block. Second of all, a really big one is getting authentication right. Again, authentication is one of those things that's a little bit invisible. You need to make sure that all of the authentication is really good, but we also want you to kind of be able to see and have a bit of a play with it.
While you're on authentication, what sort of authentication do you support? Maybe ID and password, or support SSH, private keys, public key.
Sorry, Tim, you might want to wait till Tuesday this afternoon to
yeah. Yep. So I had actually hoped. So the 2 major senior developers working on this feature, Anthony and Hugh. Hugh did the authentication. So I have, as John mentioned, I've got like kind of the shallow level knowledge about authentication. Hugh will be able to answer some of those questions, which hopefully he's going to be here soon. Certainly you can also bring it up in the source management workshop if you like there as well. So we've got our authentication solution delivered. What we want to do, give you a way to test it and to play with it, and so you can do that with the Git client. Now, third of all, Jade source, this is basically the throwaway, to be honest. So one of the things is we do have that, that issue of Jade source is not actually Git friendly, because Jade source isn't actually the schemas and the DDBs or DDXs. That's something you produce from the Jade source. The Jade source is all, within that self-contained system, which you can't really just, you couldn't just put a Jade database up on Git and expect it to do anything too useful. So we need to start thinking about solutions of how do we put Jade databases into repositories. Pardon me. The Git client is basically just one of those ways of having a way to kind of bring those sort of issues to the forefront. So while we're producing the Git client, that does show up those sort of issues so that we can work through them, and also so that we can talk about them with you, the customers. I will say that sounds like a really nice idea, but actually we already kind of knew that we'd need to do something with JSource before we started the client. But hey, I wanted a 4th point. Finally, just a cool feature. So with the Git client, you can actually start using the Git technology without using your Jade IDE, which we reckon is pretty cool. The words that Anthony wanted me to say about this is, we wanted to grow the Git experience within Jade. Cool. Now, again, this is going to be a big thing for Ant to talk about in the workshop. But just to kind of give you, again, a little bit of a teaser, I guess. So we're talking about source management here. And it's important to note that Git's actually just one part of Jade Source Management. So we have a bit of a suite. We've got, I think this is in the order of when we implemented them. Hopefully I got this right. First of all, we had deltas. So that's checking out and checking in methods. That's one way that you can help to manage your source. We have patch versioning. Incidentally, it's really hard to find a good image that sums up patch versioning. You know, deltas, I thought, the Greek symbol for delta. Git has a logo. This is actually semantic versioning, which actually doesn't really have anything to do with our patch versioning, but there you go. The second thing, of course, patch versioning. That's another part of our Jade Source Management suite. And now this is a third pillar of Jade Source Management, Git. This is the one we're starting to introduce into the product. Again, we've made a building block. We're getting started on this the source management journey with the Git client, but it's not the end of the story. Again, workshops are awesome. Cool. Now, the last thing I just kind of wanted to touch on about source management is I mentioned this new DDX format. So first thing to know about DDX is it's got all of the same information that was in the DDB files. So you can use a DDB or you can use a DDX. It's essentially just presented in a more friendly way. So it's based on XML, and it's both more friendly to humans, much easier to read, and it works much better when you go to diff things. So that was really an important step in making Jade code easier to extract and share, or extract and put in a Git repository. Other thing to note about it is we are, of course, backwards compatible. You can still load DDBs into a Jade 2018 system, and you can extract DDBs from a Jade 2018 system. So you can still use DDB if you like. This DDX is an extra. So if you want to use it, whenever you're doing an extract, or at least if you're doing it from the GUI, you've got extract forms as DDX. There's also a user preferences config setting that will turn it on by default. For instance, if you want to do it automatically or the like. So that will give you these XML DDXs. Next thing to say is kind of what it looks like. So this is the same, essentially the same extract, this time with DDB, this one with DDX. You can kind of see this DDB has all of these zeros and numbers and sort of stuff in it. Not the easiest to read. I mean, it's kind of readable, but it's pretty tough to see what's going on. This one's much better. You've got all the data and the tags describing the data. It's just an XML document. The other thing I wanted to touch on is it's much easier to diff this DDX. So I've actually got a bit of a demo where you can kind of see the difference a little bit. Oops. Great. Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Sorry, bear with me. Just grab my demo out. Okay, so what I've got here. Oops. There. What I've got here is a couple of DDB files and a couple of DDX files. This is just a EM1 view. I made some arbitrary change, and before I made the change, I extracted a DDB and a DDX. So this is essentially the same extract two formats. And then this is after the small change, a DDB and a DDX. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this through a diff tool. So if I go select left file for compare, new DDB, compare. Where are we? Let's chuck over here. Okay, so this. So everything looks different from the projector. Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Joys of screen resolutions. Okay, that kind of mostly works. So this is a different tool called Beyond Compare. It's just the one I happen to like using. There are, of course, many diff tools. This is the change in DDB. Now you'll note, okay, so there's been a change. It's pretty tough to see what's going on, right? Some stuff's changed, but I wouldn't really be able to figure out exactly what's changed from that. Now let's look at exactly the same change, but in DDX. So we'll go select left file for compare, compare to. Okay, this is much better. So the first thing we can see is that the locale changed. So I changed locale from 0 to 4105. The last person to modify it has changed to foobar, which is the name I was using at the time. We've got our, okay, so one of our timestamps has changed. This is one where we're still looking at, oh, you know, can we even do even better than that? Do we really need to have timestamps in our DDXs? We've set a system version. We've added this about form, and you can see all of this application stuff that I've added. So this is much more readable. You can actually kind of see what's going on. Whereas with the DDB, it was just some numbers and it's all on one line. Very difficult to see what had changed. So that's essentially the reason for making that DDX, is that imagine if this was in a Git repository and you're trying to figure out what's changed, it would be very difficult to do with a DDB, but you can actually pretty reasonably see what's changed in a DDX. G'day.
Now, merging XML files can be hard. Now, the DDX is there system generated, correct?
That's right.
How often does the order of the elements ever shuffle around, or is the order of what's in the XML very predictable? Because I know with some, like let's say in some generated code, the order of stuff might shuffle around just because you modified one small attribute, but does the order stay pretty much static, so when you merge it's pretty straightforward to do?
The answer is basically medium. So for the most part, it's pretty good. We are still looking at going a little bit better. The DDXs are not too bad for that. The issue we're really running into is more with schema files. Because with diffing, of course, if something just quite small changes, it can actually make a massive change in your diff, especially, as you say, if something's been reordered. I believe we're pretty decent for DDX in that way, but to be honest, schema files, we've still got some issues with that. Bob?
That's not entirely true with controls. If the Z order that you define within your painter, you push the back, bring the front, things like that, that's actually controls. That changes the order that the controls are actually set out, so that they have to in order to create them in that same Z order, they have to be in that same order. So if you do things like that, then you're going to get the same things moved within the XML.
Have you got an example of where just the method source has changed, just to see that diff? Or is that very clearly just within a particular element of your XML?
So that, I don't have a example of that. I could possibly make one up quickly. Yeah. So I don't have the example of the schemas, but I can possibly make a schema example.
That's all right.
Otherwise, in the workshop, I'll have this laptop for the workshop, so after lunch, when we come to the source management workshop, I'll show you what that looks like. Yeah. But yeah, as rightly pointed, that's not to do with DDB and DDX, but it is relevant to source management because the DDB and this DDX was one of the most egregious kind of things of it's not going to work with Git. There are still improvements to be made in schema. So that's a good point well made.